Hello everyone, this presentation is about SWCC and other military fast butt operators. We're going to talk about MTBI, repetitive head injury. I want to talk about the journey of this topic itself, where we are now with it, what kind of research has been conducted, and what evidence has been discovered at this point. Okay, so we're going to start with a bottom line up front on this. Traumatic brain injury has been confirmed to be caused by wave slamming on military fast boats, SWCC fast boats, and also Naval Special Warfare has admitted to 60G impacts, especially with rotational forces. So in March 2026, the DoD Inspector General confirmed that SWCC operators are exposed to repetitive high G impacts reaching up to confirmed 60 Gs with significant rotational forces causing cumulative brain and spinal injury. Yet, proven mitigation systems remain unimplemented despite being formally identified as critical deficiencies. So, like I said, this is fact. It's no longer conjecture. It's no longer just me saying this stuff. This correlates with the 2015 DevGroup study, which reported consistent 40G impacts on their boats and demonstrates NSW has been aware of this for quite a bit of time. All right, so another bottom line up front is this is not just a SWCC problem. It's a global occupational hazard for any unit that runs high speed, small craft, and rough water. The U.S. Coast Guard, U.S. Navy Riverine, the Marines now have special boat teams. The British Royal Marines, SBS type maritime teams, Australian boat commandos, Scandinavians, and other assault boat forces. The common denominator is the platform and the mission profile. Repetitive wave slamming, whole body vibration, shock, neck and head acceleration, fatigue, and often layered weapons blast exposure. The likely result across these communities is the same pattern: high rates of back and neck injury, chronic pain, reduced performance, acute mission degradation, and systemic probable unrecognized brain injury risk. All right, just a quick introduction before I jump into the main parts of this. I'm Anthony Smith. I'm a retired special warfare boat operator, SBC retired. I did 24 years in the Navy. I spent my first 10 years in the regular Navy. Then I joined SWCC. I spent 14 years in SWCC. I graduated from Class 20 in 1996. I served as Special Boat Team 12, Warcom, and the center out there. Mostly just West Coast stuff. I worked on several different types of platforms, and to date, I think I have somewhere between 10 and 12,000 hours of SWCC fast boat time. Or another bottom line thing here is atypical SWCC exposure, and I'm just kind of basing this off my own personal situation, but this is across the board with most folks in the community. Based on my personal 10,000 plus career hours on SWCC fast boats, with roughly half of that, 5,000 hours probably spent at 50 knots, my exposure likely involved on the order of 18 million wave slamming impacts. This is using AI to help me out with this. Using reported impact ranges of 2 to 30 Gs, that represents roughly on the low end 36 million, on the high end 540 million cumulative linear G impacts or G events, with even higher rotational loading possible depending on impact direction and head and neck dynamics. Layered on top of that, I estimate exposure of 500,000 plus rounds of 50 caliber heavy weapons fire, which is now a category the DoD recognizes as as capable of producing blast over pressure above the interim 4 psi brain health action threshold. The combined history is consistent with a career of repetitive head injury and blast exposure, not isolated events. All right, so getting into the research that I've been involved with And anyone that knows me and has been tracking what I've been doing on social media, can probably date what I've done back to 2017 to 2019. That's kind of when I started having conversations with retired SWCC operators, and it helped me understand SWCC fast boats, wave slamming, how it causes MTBI, repetitive head injury, whiplash associative disorder, in plate fractures, multi-system dysfunction, and multi-orthopedic injuries. And across the cohort of probably 1,000 former SWCC, I found the same consistent list of plus or minus 30 comorbidities secondary to repetitive head injury and traumatic brain injury. So in 2019, I went to the VA Polytrauma Center and went through their TBI assessments. They kind of laughed me off and said that wave slamming doesn't cause TBI. I took the things that they gave me. I filed a claim with the VA. The VA denied all my claims with TBI. So a buddy told me about Tulane Center for Brain Health. So in August of 2021, I ended up attending their 3-day assessment. And when I was in the out brief, talking to Dr. Stewart and his team, um, kind of going over what they diagnosed me with over those 3 days, I told them basically that I knew from personal contact with hundreds of other SWCC operators retired just like myself, that they all have the same things that I have. And I convinced Dr. Stewart at that time to conduct research and bring SWCC operators to Tulane. So when I left Tulane, I got on all of my social media platforms and I started messaging, calling, emailing, whatever I could, and sending kind of a message that I put together to everybody to say, hey, Tulane, they're doing TBI research on SWCC operators. Here's the contact information. Get in there and be part of this. So over a couple of years, Tulane saw over 100 of us SWCC operators at that point, and Tulane lost their funding. However, I've continued to send guys or get guys to go to other clinics within Avalon Action Alliance. So UNC Thrive and the Marcus Institute, several guys have gone to those clinics. There's some guys that have gone to Tampa Prep. That's not part of the Action Alliance. Some guys have gone to home base up in Boston. Either way, the TBI clinics is the starting point. So any of us that have these careers and have these exposures and have these symptoms and things, going to a TBI clinic like Tulane or like UNC Thrive or Marcus or any of these other places, that's the starting point for all of this. All right, the way all of this started for me was back when Chris Free wrote his white paper on operator syndrome. One of the DoD researchers that I've been conversing with back and forth via email, she sent me the white paper. I read the white paper, and then through a series of events, I ended up meeting Chris Free and exchanging phone numbers and getting involved with texting him and talking to him and things like that. And when he was writing his book, um, because of the extensive amount of research that I'd already done and interviews and whatnot, he asked me to do a blurb so he could put it in his book. So I am in his book. I'm in the chapter on chronic pain, and I do talk about SWCC and TBI and all of those things. All right, so everyone knows about operator syndrome, but I'm talking about SWCC operator syndrome specifically for us as fast boat operators, and this applies to other fast boat operators that do the same type of job that we do. But the premise of operator syndrome, it's a framework in which we can look at all of these different things, and we can look at it through this framework. So it's not a clinical diagnosis. It's more along the lines of just a theoretical framework and how we look at things. But when you're operating, you're training, you're deploying, you're working at night, and you're under a lot of stress. All of these things cumulatively add up over time inside of the body, add on to that injuries and everything else. And then you have this developed syndrome that we call operator syndrome, or what I'm calling SWCC operator syndrome. But for us, we have all those years of deploying, we developed that high allostatic overload and metabolic dysfunction. We develop hormonal imbalance, low testosterone, pituitary disruption. We have repetitive head injury, which leads to mild traumatic brain injury, but on a serious cumulative effect, if you will, which can lead to traumatic encephalopathy syndrome. Um, we have whiplash associated disorder. As part of that repetitive head injury, in that wave slamming process, we get what's known as diffuse axonal injury, backtracking, which leads to the encephalopathy symptoms. Um, we have orthopedic injuries. We have spinal injury, end plate fractures, wedge fractures, compression, all types of things in the cervical spine, our thoracic, and our lumbar spine. So it affects most of us all throughout our entire spine. And then we develop sleep disorders, chronic pain, and many other things. So SWCC operator syndrome, it's a pretty big thing. It covers multi-system dysfunction, and it's cumulative in nature, and it's long-term uh, progression over 10, 20, 30, 30 plus years. All right, so in December of 2022, I kind of got an online presence on YouTube, and I posted my first SWCC video, and it was titled SWCC Operator Syndrome, and I started doing interviews with guys and talking about things within their own lives. So I did about 25 interviews that I made YouTube videos out of, and I've done multiple videos on operator syndrome and traumatic brain injury and all the cumulative effects. You can look at my webpage there. You can find me on YouTube. So after talking to uh, hundreds and hundreds of SWCC operators, well over 1,000 by now, I saw that we all had the same problems, same issues, this long list of comorbidities, and I decided I wanted to capture all this data and do something about it. So in early 2023, I did an online survey. That online survey it was open for about a month, um, and then this data was collected in April of 2023. Some of the key findings on repetitive neurotrauma that I found. The bottom line here is strong self-reported evidence of chronic multi-system injury consistent with repetitive head injury, MTBI, driven by wave slamming and blast overpressure. There were high prevalences of neurological, spine, and musculoskeletal damage in this survey. There were over 300 SWCC operators that participated in it. So on the neurological and the TBI symptoms, there were 39 post-concussion symptoms tracked in the survey. 28 symptoms reported in the survey were 70 to 90% uh, by participants. You can see confusion, dizziness, memory issues, lack of concentration, blackouts. This is clinically consistent with concussion and MTBI. On the spinal side, which was also a critical finding, 90% of all the participants had spinal injuries, some pretty severe injuries. 33 out of the 314 reported no spinal injuries, so not a lot. Chronic axial loading and repetitive compression flexion takes place when these boats are slamming into the waves, and you're getting all this compression and loading in your spine. Um, and this is near universal injury pattern. Whiplash and neck trauma. If you can imagine being on a boat, uh, driving 50, 60 miles an hour and jumping waves, 3, 4, 5, 6 foot waves, whatever the case might be, as that boat jumps and slammed into the next wave, you're going to have some whiplash that takes place. 84% of us could say that, yeah, we had experienced whiplash on these boats, which is a very high number. Um, Whiplash is linked to TBI at 5 Gs and greater. SWIC exposure excited at 25 to 100 Gs, so which is pretty significant for us. So it's combined brain, cervical spine, and injury mechanism. And then extremities and joint damage. 98% of us said that we had some type of injury to our spine or to our joints. So our primary mechanism of injury is wave slamming, and then we also have crew serve weapons and blast over pressure. Secondary health effects, we have sleep disorders, anxiety, depression, PTSD symptoms, hormonal and metabolic dysfunction, cardiovascular issues. And then key strengths and takeaways from the survey that I did is over 300 respondents, which was a pretty large sample size. Um, these are all experienced operators. There were, on average, the age was about 50, I believe. 11 years time in service as a SWIC operator, and then 5 deployments. Uh, what validates this is when I built this survey, I didn't just come up with my own questions. I talked to Dr. Free. He sent me all of the surveys that he uses when he talks to patients, and so I used the NSI, the GAD-7, the PHQ-9, and the PLC-5, and then the operator syndrome inventory as well. Okay, this slide here is something I made a few weeks ago. I posted it online already, but it's a very important slide. It's called Pathophysiological Model of Chronic Repetitive Mechanical Loading in High-Speed Maritime Operators. So the bottom line up front is chronic exposure to high frequency, high G mechanical loading in high-speed maritime operators drives a cascade of cellular, neurological, and systemic dysfunction through mechanotransduction, ultimately resulting in what can be described as SWIC operator syndrome. And the key thing that I want to focus in on this slide and in all future research is this term called mechanotransduction. So if you don't know that term, you need to research it and start kind of understanding what it means. So we're gonna kind of dig through this slide piece by piece. So over to the left, we have what's called a chronic mechanical exposure profile at the top left. Bottom line with this is operators are exposed to extreme repetitive whole body impacts that accumulate into millions of loading cycles over a career. Some of the key talking points are if you're doing 50 knots, which I did all the time, you're going to experience 3,600 impacts in an hour. Basically, a boat will slam into a wave at a 1 second interval, so 3,600 impacts per hour. These impacts could be 2 Gs, they could be 15 Gs, 20 Gs, or 30 Gs. I'd say on average they're going to be 15 to 20 Gs. I've done many 8-hour runs. I've done 16-hour runs. So conceivably, if you did 8 hours for 3,600 impacts, you're looking at a lot of impacts. Actually, about 28,000, give or take. And a typical operator in SWIC is going to have 10 to 15,000 hours of career time on fast boats, and that translates into millions of mechanical loading events, not just millions of self-concussive events, but mechanical loading events as well. And force transmission travels through the whole body with the cervical focus at the C5 through C7. If you look at the quantification block, the bottom line here is this is not occasional trauma. This is industrial scale exposure to repetitive mechanical stress. And the key talking points is it highlights cumulative dose, not a single event injury, establishes dose response relationship, and it frames this as an occupational exposure, not an incidental injury. If you look at the cervical fulcrum model, the bottom line is the neck, specifically the C5 to the C7, acts as a biomechanical pivot point, amplifying forces transmitted to the brain. The key points is the pivot point, or the fulcrum, is the C5 through the C7, and the lever arm is the head, which is roughly about 15 centimeters from the fulcrum. A helmet increases the mass torque, and it converts vertical impact into rotational strain on the brain. When we talk about rotational forces, the bottom line is rotational forces, not linear forces, are the primary driver of brain injury due to amplified shear stress. And the key points is angular acceleration rads. Your helmet mass increases the rotational load, and it can be up to 4 to 5 times greater shear strain than the linear forces. And this is the core injury mechanism for axonal damage. Mechanical load and cellular response, when we look at the top center, the bottom line is mechanical stress is converted into biological damage through mechanotransduction at the cellular level. And the key points is membrane deformation triggers ion channels, multiple things there, calcium influx. It activates integrins, intercellular signaling pathways, and this is where physics becomes biology. The cytoskeletal and axonal injury, bottom line is mechanical stress disrupts the structural integrity of neurons, leading to impaired signaling and transport failure. And this is also the cellular structure within bone integrity as well. Key points is axonal stretch and shear, microtubule disruption, breakdown in axonal transport, and it leads to diffuse axonal injury pathology, or DIA pathology, throughout the brain. Neurovascular injury, the bottom line is repetitive loading damages the brain's vascular system, impairing blood flow and the barrier integrity. Key points is blood-brain and barrier disruption, endothelial dysfunction, microvascular dysfunction, and sets conditions for chronic neurodegeneration. Neuroinflammation cascade, the bottom line is chronic activation of the brain's immune system drives ongoing damage long after exposure. And the key points are microglial activation, persistent cytokine release, and it leads to chronic inflammation, or a chronic inflammatory state in the brain. The lymphatic dysfunction, the bottom line is the brain loses its ability to clear waste, accelerating toxic protein buildup, and the key points are it's impaired waste clearance, it leads to tau protein accumulation, it's linked to sleep disruption, and it contributes to CTE-like pathology. CNS pathology at the top right. The bottom line is this repeated head acceleration leads to progressive brain injury and neurodegenerative changes. And the key points are axonal injury, neuroinflammation, and associated conditions such as TBI, tau pathology, cognitive decline, and mood disorders. When we look at musculoskeletal pathology, the bottom line is the spine and the joints undergo degenerative changes due to chronic mechanical load or overload. And the key points are degenerative disc disease, facet joint degeneration, chronic pain syndromes, and direct result of repetitive axial loading. So the spine takes a pretty severe beating. Systemic dysfunction, autonomic. The bottom line is the nervous system loses its ability to regulate basic physiological functions. The key points are dysregulated heart rate, blood pressure instability, sympathetic overdrive, and it explains symptoms like anxiety, dizziness, fatigue. The HPA axis dysfunction, the bottom line is chronic stress and brain injury disrupt hormonal balance and stress response systems, and the key points are cortisol and testosterone imbalance, sleep disruption, mood instability, and it links brain injury to the endocrine dysfunction.
Metabolic dysfunction. Bottom line is neurological and hormonal disruption leads to systemic metabolic disease. And some of the key points is uh, dyslipidemia, impaired glucose tolerance, visceral fat accumulation, and it shows it's whole body disease, not just a brain injury. And the cumulative injury model, SWCC operator syndrome, this is the bottom. The cumulative effect of repetitive mechanical loading produces a distinct multisystem disease pattern, and the key points of this entire thing is chronic exposure, neurological injury, progressive spinal degeneration, system-wide physiological dysfunction, and it defines unique occupational syndrome. And in closing with this entire slide here, um, this model demonstrates that what SWCC operators experience is not isolated injury, it's cumulative. System-wide, it's a system-wide disease process driven by millions of repetitive mechanical insults, transforming physical forces into long-term neurological and physiological dysfunction. In 2023, I had been posting a lot of videos online on social media, and David Phillips reached out to me. He's an he's a writer for the New York Times. Um, he wanted to do a story on TBI, more mechanically versus blast overpressure. So we started talking, and over about a time frame of a year, we went back and forth with information. I connected him with a lot of different individuals. He did a lot of interviews with people. He ended up writing a story in the New York Times called Chronic Brain Trauma is Extensive in Navy's Elite Speedboat Crews. It was published on 12 November 2024. And really, I think the New York Times article kind of put us on the map in terms of the national scene when it comes to wave slamming and TBI and that type of thing. So a lot of people came out and tried to refute the information in that story. However, I'm the one that's behind that story with Dave Phillips. Everything in that story is true. There may be some things in there that he said a little different than how we said it to him, but everything in that story is true. So that really put us on the map, and I think it's very important for all of us. This is a pretty important development, but the Traumatic Brain Injury Center of Excellence information paper of February 2025 confirms that special warfare combat crewmen are routinely exposed to repeated wave slamming impacts that can exceed 20 Gs, resulting in high prevalence of musculoskeletal injuries, chronic pain, and likely under-recognized traumatic brain injury. The survey data shows 90% of operators sustain injury, 70% experience performance impairing impacts, and 33% report loss of consciousness, yet the report highlights a critical gap. TBI and long-term neurological effects remain insufficiently studied and likely underreported. The paper makes clear that while the physical injury burden is well documented, the cumulative brain health consequences of repeated subconcussive and concussive impacts are not fully understood, representing a significant operational and medical blind spot for the force. The bottom line is I refuse to shut my mouth. I continue to spend my off time and my weekends working on this topic and doing research and posting things on social media. That led to this right here, which is the House Committee on Veterans Affairs. They were a Democratic group. They reached out to me sometime in April of 2025. I think one of the members made contact with me on LinkedIn, and I was actually going up to do the HBOT treatment, or actually I went up there to kind of
look at the HBOT treatment I was going to up in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Shout out to Aurelius and Anson Flakes, the great dude he is. But anyway, I was up there. He was running me around like a crazy man. Wouldn't even let me take time to stop and eat pizza. Uh, but anyway, um, I got on a Zoom call with the House Committee while I was there in one of his TMS treatment rooms and talked to the House Committee. Um, I gave them information on SWCC TBI, and in that process of several emails, Teams meetings, I gave them all the research that I had done on this particular topic at the time and a list of issues and conditions we as a community are seeking to become presumptive for military fast boat operators. Primary, we said TBI from repetitive head injury and wave slamming and blast over pressure. And then secondary to all of that are a list of things such as, or comorbidities, such as migraines and headaches, insomnia, sleep apnea, endocrine dysfunction, vestibular dysfunction, central processing disorder, anxiety, uh, depression, and many other issues. The present moment, they are writing proposed legislation for all of these things. All right, moving on to June of 2025, a very significant thing happened, and unfortunately, because of what Troy did when he committed suicide, he shot himself in his heart because he knew he had problems with his brain, and he knew it was from being a SWCC operator. But in 2025, after they had written a white paper, Dr. Premier and Dr. Stewart and Dr. Daniel Pearl and some other doctors. Daniel Pearl is the doctor that runs the clinic up in Bethesda. Um, anyway, they had done a autopsy on Troy's brain, and then the bottom line with this is severe CTE in a naval SWCC. The report on chronic traumatic encephalopathy and a U.S. Naval Special Warfare combat crewman. The postmortem case study found severe CTE stage 4 uh, per consensus criteria in his brain. Troy was 44.9 years old. He was a former SWCC. He had a 12-year career and multiple deployments. He was medically retired. The conclusions of their report from their autopsy was repetitive physical forces sustained from high-speed boat impacts and waves may be sufficient to promote or contribute to CTE development, particularly given the young age and the extent presented. USU said that this particular case was the worst case of CTE that they had seen. So if you look this report up, you can find it. There's a link there to it. But if you just type in the if you type in the title, you can find it. But to me, this is kind of like the staple, the starting point of really kind of documenting what is happening to us and inside of our brains. And it is evidence, it's proof, and there's a lot more to go. This slide is for every fast boat operator, SWCC, Coast Guard, doesn't matter who you are. The reality is, if you spend thousands of hours on fast boats and they slam into the waves, you're getting what's known as diffuse axonal injury, which can lead to eventual CTE, dementia, those types of things. The only way this can be confirmed is through autopsy. So if you donate your brain to USU, to the brain repository, um, at some point in time, more brains will be examined and we'll have a better understanding of the end state of what's going to happen to all of us. So donate your brain. Get onto this website. There's a link there. Type it in and get to the website. Email Stacy Gentile. She's the point of contact, and donate your brain. Thank you. This is DAB Resolution 629. If you're a military fast boat operator, SWCC operator, whomever, your wave slamming causes repetitive head injury and TBI,
And this resolution is going through Congress to try to get it presumptive for us for TBI and other secondary issues. So this will be very important for us to watch in the future.
All right, this DAV resolution 92, this is the final published draft of it. I haven't spent a lot of time talking about this in my research, although Brian mentioned to me that this would be of significant importance for SWCC operators like myself. This is in relation to blast, overpressure causing TBI and CTE and those types of things. So this is an important resolution for all of us. So we need to keep track of this and pay attention to it, because for any of us that spent time out there shooting a lot of weapons, a lot of crew serve weapons, feed the cow, rocket launchers, shoulders and mortars and all shorter fire mortars and all those other things, this pertains to you. All of these different types of weapon systems cause uh, pretty drastic PSI, leading to brain injury from blast overpressure. There's also a number, resolution 93, that I'm not going to list in this, but it has to do with us getting treatment for hyperbaric oxygen therapy, which is something I am an advocate for. And I do spend a lot of my spare time getting guys to HBOT treatment. So if you're interested in that, hook me up or hit me up. Okay, this is a story written by Brian Buckwater. Um, this story is in DAV magazine, the September-October 2025 publication. You can find it online. All you gotta do is just type it in. Uh, the article is called, title is Something's Wrong with My Head. It features Navy SEAL Ryan Larkin and myself, Navy SWCC Anthony Smith. Ryan Larkin, if you look him up, or if you read the story, you can see that he had a lot of brain trauma from being a Navy SEAL, shooting guns and everything else that he did, working with explosives, and with his TBI the way that it was, he ended up killing himself. And when they did an autopsy on his brain, they confirmed that he had brain damage. So he killed himself in order to bring attention to this situation. Um, I personally have chosen to do online research and advocate for traumatic brain injury, wave slamming, and repetitive injury and head injury, and all of these other things. So that's why I'm featured in this story along with Brian. Um, if you look at the slide, it has lots of things on there to kind of take away from it. But the reality is, we have a lot of guys from the community that are suicidal because they have brain injury from various mechanisms, and our goal is to get it recognized for one thing, but another goal is to find treatments that can change brain chemistry, brain physiology, uh, and keep guys from committing suicide. So that's the end goal here, and this story is that's what it's about. All right, here in March of 2026, this report came out. It's in JAMA. It's open access. You can get to it. It's titled "Clinical Characteristics of Combat Crewmen," and basically, uh, these guys decided to study SWCC and SEALs from NICO, and as you can see there were 459 SEALs and there were 86 SWCC that they had did a comparison with. But the comparison statistics that you're looking at on the slide are talking about SWCC. So what they found between all of these operators that have been to NICO, there were higher symptom burden in SWCC in these key areas. The neurosymptom inventory was increased severity with somatic, sensory, cognitive, vestibular, headache, impact, disruption,
Daytime sleepiness, greater uh, greater burden of these complaints and functional alertness issues compared to the SILs. Also, post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. Basically, what they're saying is, although we are diagnosed with PTSD, that we're we have physiological changes in our brain from most likely diffuse axonal injury, from repetitive head injury and rotational forces and that type of thing. So although um, a lot of us may have a PTSD diagnosis, they're saying that it's not true PTSD for us. It's physiological changes in our brain due to diffuse axonal injury. Alcohol consumption for our guys were a lot less than for the SILs. So take a look at this, see what you think about it. But it's definitely more information out there helping out this cause. All right, the Inspector General's report, which came out in March of 2026. Basically, they went to Naval Special Warfare to see how um, they were recording and reporting SWCC traumatic brain injury, if there were any shortcomings and that type of thing. And there are a lot of shortcomings in this whole process. I don't know that anyone's at fault with it, but there are shortcomings. But the key finding from this is the DoD Inspector General confirmed that SWCC operators are exposed to repetitive high G impacts reaching up to 60 Gs with significant rotational forces causing cumulative brain and spinal trauma. And I think that's the key thing to take away from all this is this report is actually confirming that we have brain injury from wave slamming from being on boats, and that these rotational forces are pretty significant. 60 Gs is pretty standard in some of the impacts in the NFL. So, but the difference is we take millions and millions of impacts versus their 30,000 over a career. We can get that in just a day or two. Yeah, proven mitigation systems remain unimplemented despite being formally identified as critical deficiencies. So, like I said, this report here I think it's the smoking gun. It proves wave slamming causes TBI. It proves that we take 60G impacts, and everyone that has been affected in some way with long-term issues from traumatic brain injury and hasn't been properly diagnosed and evaluated and had the proper ratings from the VA, I think this is the way forward to making sure that that takes place. All right, so another significant development is USU, Uniform Services University, uh, launched a study called the BOAT study. And BOAT stands for Blast Overpressure, Acceleration, and Cognitive Testing in SWCC. And the purpose of this study is to gather data on SWCC operators over a 2-year time frame. I believe that's what I read in the report. And this is the first DoD study of its kind. I think the limitations of this study is that they're looking at 30 and 40-year-old operators who do not exhibit long-term effects of wave slamming as a 50 and a 60-year-old operator would. But in the course of a couple years, the people identified to participate in this study will wear different types of instrumentation to capture impacts from wave slamming or blast overpressure if they're shooting or whatever the case might be. Like I said, this is the first DoD study confirming SWCC neurological injury risk, and I think this will give us some good data in the next couple years when it's published. I'm hoping for something good to come out of this. But look this thing up online, take a look at it, and see what you think about it for yourself. This slide is about cumulative high G-force exposure in the SWCC operator phenotype. But more importantly, there's a major difference between someone who's in their 30s or their 40s or younger, who's still a tactical athlete, still in good shape. They're exhibiting a lot of issues with wave slamming and TBI and repetitive head injury. But when you look at someone who's in their 50s and their 60s, they're living in the long-term cumulative effects of all of these things. So there needs to be a study that looks at 60-year-old operators, 50-year-old operators who have the long-term injuries. That's the bottom line. That's what needs to happen. Okay, this study here is very important to me. I'm one of the authors involved in this one. Um, what you're looking at is the abstract that was published in 2025, but it was in Clinical Neurosurgery, volume 72, number 1, published in April 2026, page 145. This study of 234 blast or fast boat operators demonstrates that prolonged exposure to repetitive high G impacts is strongly associated with both brain and spinal injury, with over 40% of operators diagnosed with TBI and 70 to 88% showing degenerative changes across the cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine. Importantly, TBI rates increase with greater cumulative boat exposure, as we all know, prior head trauma, and cervical spinal stenosis, while symptomatic burden included headaches, vestibular dysfunction, memory impairment, and depression. These findings support that wave slamming is not just a musculoskeletal issue, but a systemic neurotrauma mechanism, and that many symptoms currently attributed to psychological causes may instead reflect underlying organic brain and spinal injury. This report should be published in the coming months here in 2026, so I look forward to that. Thank you. This slide talks about the NATO Mashin study led by the pioneer of wave slamming research, who is Dr. Johan Ullman. Uh, he confirms that repetitive high speed boat wave slamming produces rapid, high rate jerk acceleration forces that are significantly more damaging than previously understood, causing cumulative spinal and brain injuries, including TBI and CTE like pathology, and current measurement methods have underestimated the risk by focusing on vibration instead of shock dynamics. So this is an interesting report or interesting study that's ongoing and should show us some things about wave slamming and TBI. Getting close to the end of this presentation, military fast boat wave slamming, what is the cost in operator injury? I've identified some things. There's probably 100 more that I haven't put on here, but repetitive head injury, we're looking at millions of impacts, which is probably 100 times beyond anything previously measured in the NFL. Diffuse axonal injury, we're talking about the entire brain, most likely um, total brain pathology. Mild traumatic brain injury of a severe repetitive nature, whiplash associative disorder, potential traumatic encephalopathy syndrome, which is TESS, cervical, thoracic, and lumbar spine trauma, that's every SWCC operator, and fast boat operator. And a key thing is millions of high G-force impacts to the spine, leading to mechanotransduction, causing severe bone maladaptation in spine and joints, which is misunderstood and it's not studied. There's a major gap in research regarding spine trauma and mechanotransduction. The worst case of CTE ever studied at USU was a SWCC operator, and over half of all SWCC operators have unreported traumatic brain injury. This slide speaks for itself. I really don't need to talk too much about it. This is why we do what we do. This is why we talk about the things that we talk about. This is why we bring this traumatic brain injury, repetitive head injury,
from wave slamming, blast overpressure, whatever the case might be. This is why we bring it out into the public. It's not just for diagnosis, it's not just for treatments, it's not just for VA ratings and compensation, but it's to keep this from happening. And the only thing I do want to point out is there are two names on this list that I cannot confirm were suicides, but the situations uh, around their deaths are significant, I think. However, in 2025, there's 7 people on this list last year. There was a huge uptick in deaths last year, or suicides. It's April now, 2026, and there are none that I know of this year so far. That's great, thank God. Um, However, I'm sure there's a lot more than what's on this list. This is just in my limited capacity to do research in my spare time. These are the names. This is the list that I have. This is something I'll continue to work on in the future to tell the story, but this is why we do what we do.
Okay, in conclusion, in the past 4 years, I've personally spent thousands of hours in this space researching SWCC and other fast boat operators, repetitive head injury, TBI, and spinal injuries. Many reports have been published. The Inspector General's office has documented 60 impacts from wave slamming and that it causes TBI. Congress is aware of the issue and the DAV is advocating for us as well. Soon we will have presumptive for fast boat wave slamming, TBI, and many secondary issues. Until then, we will keep informing, advocating, and bringing this issue out in public forums. I am co-author on a peer-reviewed article which is coming out in a few weeks regarding neurotrauma in SWCC and other fast boat operators. And lastly, I am actively helping operators attend treatments to improve their quality of life. One treatment is HBOT, or hyperbaric oxygen therapy. Look it up and contact me on LinkedIn. You know who I am if you want help, and the help is free. Thank you, and God bless.